Litha, also known as the summer solstice, is the longest day of the year. It's the sabbat of fire and fertility, of warmth, and of all those things that are in full bloom in our lives. But there's also a darker mystery to Litha because at this point, this is where the sun begins its descent into the dying half and waning half of the wheel of the year. So tonight we're going to be talking about the lore and the origins of Litha. We're going to talk about different ways that witches celebrate Litha, as well as some correspondences and some simple practices and spells that you can do at home to celebrate this beautiful and bountiful turning point of the wheel. So merry meet, welcome. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and tonight we are here with a witch's guide to Litha Summer Solstice. So merry meet to those who are joining us live. Say hi in the chat and let us know that you are here. As always, there's a Q&A at the end of the episode, and I will answer questions, but I'll also be watching the feed as we go through the episode. So I'm going to dive in, and we are going to start with the origins and the lore of Litha. What is the summer solstice? What is Litha? Why do we call it Litha in witchcraft circles? And then we'll get into the correspondences and the practices that you can do, as well as some themes as well that you can work with throughout this season. And before we begin, just a reminder with all Sabbats, it is not a singular day. So yes, it is true that we will transition into the season on the 21st this year, this Sunday, as we move through the summer solstice. But Litha itself, like all Sabbats, is a seasonal energy, which means that you have approximately 5 to 6 weeks before we start to transition into Linaza energy to really take advantage of this space in your life. All right, so let us dive in and let's start with, well, what is Litha summer solstice? So the summer solstice, as I mentioned, is the longest day of the year and also the shortest night. So you've probably, and this is true of whether you are in the northern or the southern hemisphere, but the dates will differ depending on where you are. So you may have noticed, if you're in the northern hemisphere, like the vast majority of our viewers, you may have noticed that the sun is rising much earlier. It's almost at 5 a.m. in some places here, and that it is also setting much later. It can be 8 or even later, and that is lengthening the space of time that is the daytime, right? Hence why we call this the longest day and the shortest night. Now, the sun reaches its highest peak of power at this time. In this particular year, as I mentioned, in the northern hemisphere, this will happen on June 21st, this Sunday. And I think it's around 4 in the morning is the actual peak, but I forgot to look up the exact time before I started the episode. Of course, in the southern hemisphere, our friends there will be celebrating winter solstice, and then these two switch. At when we in northern hemisphere are celebrating the winter solstice on December 20th or the 21st, our friends in the southern hemisphere are celebrating the summer solstice. The rest of this episode will be about Litha summer solstice. Known as Litha by many pagans and many witches. Sometimes people in the kind of non-magical world have no idea what we're talking about when we refer to it as Litha. But it is believed that in addition to this being a time of great light and longer days and shorter nights, that there's also a spiritual and a magical threshold that we are crossing when we cross over the summer solstice. Now, as we mentioned, this is the height of the growing half of the wheel, the growing season. And it is the transition into the waning half of the year or the dying half of the year. So this is really sometimes strange to think about because I don't know about you, but most people. I work in education. I work with kids, and summer. We're out. Kids are out of school for summer now. It's the beginning of summer. It feels like this is just the beginning of the peak of the sun's power. But the reality is that this is the peak of the power, and every day past this until we get to the winter solstice, that energy is waning. So it's really, I think there's an important lesson as we get further into the episode. We're going to talk talk about the themes of Litha, but there's an important lesson for us here is that, even at that peak of our power, whatever that is that we're talking about, whether that's our career or our parenthood journey, or it can be our educational journey, or whatever it is, that journey that we're on, or our spiritual journey, right? There are always transitions and there are always cycles that we go through. And I think that that is really what's encapsulated in Litha, because here we are at this highest point of the sun's power, but this is just simply one day in a cycle that transitions us into the next part of the cycle. Now, one misconception because of that is that Litha is just this time of celebration and joy. And while that is absolutely very true, and in fact, I think of all the Sabbats, to me, this is kind of the most joyful one. A lot of people like to kick back. It's the beginning of summer here. Take it easy, do fun stuff. I think it's important for us still to recognize that this is the beginning of the sun's descent. Litha asks us, what is fullest in our lives right now? So these are some good contemplation questions for you to think about. You can, if you feel called to, you can share in the chat as well. But, what is fullest in your life right now? What has grown since winter? Because that is that space of time of the growing half of the year. So what has grown in your life since Yule? What needs to be celebrated? It's important for us to celebrate our wins and our victories and the positive things in our lives, right? Because they bolster us and they give us the stamina to get through the harder spaces. So what needs celebration right now in your life? And what needs tending before the harvest season begins? So before we actually move into the harvest, which essentially starts at Lunaza in about 6 weeks from now, what in your life needs tending before we get to that place? So these are some overarching questions that you can ask yourself about Litha. Like I said, it's not something that you have to answer tonight or even in the next couple of days. It is something, these are questions that you can carry with you through the rest of Litha season, and use these in your contemplation, use these for journaling prompts, pull some cards around these questions if you like to pull cards. So let's go into the lore and the origin as well of the holiday. And it looks like I can see Andrea in the chat, but I do feel like I might be having trouble with the chat. Or I'm hoping this is feeding live, but let us know if you are live. Let me know you're here. It just helps me know, because I'm not always I'm not always fed all of the comments, and I can't ever see how many people are actually here. Okay, so the lore and the origin, and also let us know, how are you celebrating Litha this year? Is this your first time celebrating Summer Solstice Litha? Have you done it before? What are your traditions, and how do you celebrate? So the lore, the origin, and of this time. So it's important for us to remember that the summer solstice has been honored in many, many, many cultures across thousands of years. But the modern way that we as witches practice Litha or recognize and celebrate Litha as a witch's sabbat has been shaped by modern witches, modern Wiccans, modern pagans. And so the reality is that what we celebrate today as Litha, it's not the exact replica of our ancient ancestors and what they celebrated. It's really an amalgamation or a coming together of seasonal customs and folk traditions of our ancestors, and then also those practices that have made their way into the traditions of modern pagan groups and Wiccan groups and witchcraft circles. And so it's really a combination of the old and the new together. Now, some of those ancient and folk connections is, as you can imagine, kind of think back to our ancient ancestors and how they would have been experiencing this time of the year if they were tracking the sun. Remember, they didn't have modern medicine, they didn't have the internet, they couldn't look up the correspondences and the peak times of the day when the sun was at its peak power. And so if they were observing what was going on over time, they would have naturally noticed that the sun was rising steeper and steeper every day. It was higher in the sky. The daytime was longer, the nighttime was shorter. And so our ancient ancestors honored the sun. The sun was responsible for everything to them, for their life vitality. If the sun was not there, if the sun did not follow its predictable cycle, that could have massive ramifications for crops and harvesting later in the year, and then sustaining your group of people through the winter. Observing the sun's movement, celebrating the sun as a deity, and as an energy that produced all the energy that we need in the world. Our ancestors looked at this longest day of the year as something very special. And so people would gather often for sunrise, sometimes for sunset, but often for sunrise at Litha. We call it Litha, but it's summer solstice. There could be fires, there could be feasting, there could be music and dancing and community, and just different ways for people to come together as a group. Now, bonfires have always been traditional, and so the bonfire is very important to Beltane, the sabbat right before this one in the wheel. Bonfires are good for protection. They're known to have been used for protection and purification. There was a fertility aspect to them as well. They had the ability, people would drive cattle and other animals between bonfires in order to bless them. People could jump over the bonfires in order to increase their own fertility. And the bonfires were also used to drive harmful spirits away, because the idea is you have this whole crop of plants, right? And you want them to survive. And sort of this idea that, pestilence could be caused by these evil spirits. And so the bonfires could be used to drive those away and ensure a better harvest when the time came. So it's traditionally thought of as more of a Beltane idea, but the bonfire and fire in general spills over into Litha. So I'm just giving you some of the lore, and that way we can better see where some of our modern Litha and summer solstice practices come from when we get to that part of the episode. I think that another thing to consider is how the fire itself represents the sun itself. And so our ancestors did a lot of sympathetic magic. So fire, if you tended to a fire, if you produced this beautiful fire, essentially what you were doing is you're honoring the sun and you're ensuring that more of that energy comes to the land. So I think that is, such an important aspect of Litha. So if you wanted to create your own bonfire, to me at Litha, you can't really have enough fire. You can light candles. You can create fires in your cauldron. If you had the capability of building a bonfire or going to a place where someone has one, it's a great tradition to be doing at Litha. Now, other kind of traditions of Litha is there's a connection to herbs and flowers and to the earth itself. So it's really very much a fire holiday, but it's also very much one that celebrates the earth and this idea that kind of like the earth is giving birth to what will become the harvest, right? And so flowers and herbs and trees are also very important at Litha and were very important to our ancestors. Midsummer has long been associated with flowers and plants. In fact, there's a lot of lore of actually harvesting plants at midsummer. At the height of the sun's peak, would then imbue those herbs with all of that potent energy. And then as you dried those herbs and carried them on with you into the rest of the year, you take with you vital energy of the sun, right? I'll do this side note in a moment so I don't get off track, but many traditions, like I said, would consider the herbs that were harvested on the summer solstice as being the absolute most potent that they could be. Because, of course, they grew under that heightened light. We will be talking specifically about the herbs that are connected to Litha in a little bit. I'm going to go through some correspondences, including stones and deities and all of that. So we'll talk more about the specific herbs. But I wanted to just go off on a minor tangent because I have been asked this question before, and I certainly know before I knew the answer to it, I wondered about it sometimes. But we talk about, we'll often hear that Litha is also known as midsummer. And in fact, one of the books, I will show you a little bit later, I'll tell you more about the book, but this particular book is actually called Midsummer. But this is the book that Llewellyn's Sabbat series uses to represent Litha. So where does the word midsummer come from when this is actually the beginning of the summer for us, at least for our calendar, right? So the idea of where midsummer comes from is from the Celtic calendar, where summer actually began at Beltane. And in fact, in some versions of the Celtic calendar, there isn't the old Celtic calendar. There isn't even 4 seasons. It's just 2. It's winter and summer. And so the kind of the winter season was thought to, or summer season was thought to begin at Beltane. And so by the time you got to to Litha or summer solstice, you were actually at midsummer, right? And so that's where that word comes from. So just for anybody who was wondering, like I once wondered. So you can use those words kind of synonymously, midsummer, Litha, or summer solstice. Okay, so let's go on. Before I jump into the more of the spiritual side of Litha, one other thing I wanted to talk about that is very much connected to the summer solstice is the battle of the Oak King and the Holly King. And it feels like it was just yesterday I was talking about this, but it was 6 months ago when I was talking about this at Yule or winter solstice. So, for those who don't know, the Oak King and the Holly King, this is a story of 2 kings. One king, the Oak King, rules the waxing half or the growing half of the year, and the other king, the Holly King, rules the waning half or the dying half of the year. And so at 2 times throughout the cycle of the wheel, the Oak King and the Holly King fight it out. They battle it out. And at Litha summer solstice, the Holly King is triumphant, and it is believed that's what then ushers in the waning half of the year. And then he will rule triumphant all through the fall, all the way to winter solstice, when again the 2 kings will battle it out. But this time, the Oak King will win. And then he will usher in the waxing half of the year, which starts at winter solstice and goes all the way to summer solstice. So it's kind of an interesting story. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details of it, but you can read more if you're interested in it. You can look it up. Sometimes people will do reenactments of it at either of the solstices. You can do like a mystery play around it, or you can do kind of a meditative journey with the Oak King and the Holly King. That's what we did last winter solstice in our coven. But it's just really an interesting story. And I think too, I feel like what's most important about this story is it reminds us that nothing ever stays at its peak power forever. And it doesn't mean that something becomes lesser, because we certainly would not think that the Oak King, who is kind of defeated at summer solstice, has now become less of what he was. He is just become defeated so that this other energy takes his place, and then he will come again, right? He will rise to his power again in another time. But I think it very much reminds us to remember that as well, that things don't last forever, but that things always come in cycles. So I'm going to talk now about the spiritual meaning of Litha, but just taking a break to say hi to a few more in the chat. Merry meet to Bernadette, and Lisa is here, and Jen, Merry meet, and Rebecca. So let us know how are you guys celebrating Litha this year. We'd love to hear from you if you have any plans. So I'm going to go now into the spiritual side of Litha. So really what this solstice is about, and this sabbat is about, it's about our own thriving. So really thinking about what is thriving in your life right now, but also recognizing again that that peak energy must be directed wisely, because that peak energy isn't always there at your disposal, right? It's going to change, it's going to shift. So the real question for you is how are you going to direct that peak energy right now while you have access to it? So the first theme that I'm going to talk about tonight with Litha is the theme of vitality. And so the question for you to really think about is what makes you feel most alive? And so if you haven't thought about that, sometimes some of you are thinking about that all the time. You know how to answer that question very easily. Others of you may not think about that very often. So, really think about what makes you feel the most alive. Feel free to put it in the chat if you want, or you can journal on it, or you can contemplate it over the next, several weeks. Litha is an excellent time for you to reconnect with the things that make you feel best. And so if you have gotten into a pattern of just kind of the drudgery of life and just going, in the motions, but you haven't really thought about what makes you happy, now is a good time to think about it. What makes you smile? What makes you happy? And if you don't have enough of that in your life right now, well, a good thought for this Litha season is how could I bring more of what makes me happy into my life, right? Anything that's connected to your life force, to your passion, to your creativity, to your pleasure. Litha is also very much connected to your body and movement and feeling good in your body. So, it's getting warmer, and I know, at least for me, I feel this drive to move a little bit more when it's warm. I just did a really awesome hike on Sunday up a mountain that was just very invigorating. For everybody, though, it's different what brings that life force vitality into them. So really think about that, and if you do feel like you don't have enough of that in your life right now, now's a good time to bring it in. It doesn't mean that you have to be extroverted to be tapping into this energy or constantly productive. It doesn't mean that. Your vitality can be filled by just simply taking a walk in the sun. I felt so invigorated just walking, climbing up that mountain and feeling the sun on me. Eating seasonal fruit and taking in the vitality, that heightened vitality of the land. Making art. You don't have to be considered a traditional artist to make art. Just make something, right? Moving your body, anything that brings that life force vitality into you and makes you feel good, makes your spirit feel good. Those are all things to think about. How could I bring more of that into my life throughout the rest of Litha season? Now, a second theme is the theme of abundance. So moving into Litha, right? We come through Ostara, the spring equinox, and then we come through Beltane. There's all of that growing vital energy, right? And then we get to this peak of the sun's power, and then we start to move into the harvest festivals, the harvest holidays, the sabbats of Lunaza and Mabon in particular, and also Samhain. So Litha falls before these three harvest festivals. So we're not really quite at the full harvest yet, but we are getting there, right? Abundance is very visible in the land around us, nevertheless. So it's sort of like the flower before it's become the fruit. That's a good way to think of Litha, right? Or the promise before seeing the final result. That's kind of what I think of with Litha. So questions for you to contemplate are, what is growing in your life right now? What would you like to see more growth around? This is a good time to put some energy into that. If you've got a business, if you've got a project that you're working on, if you have something that you've struggled with maybe through the winter and the spring, this is a good holiday to kind of put that forward and put this energy behind it, right? And then there's also this question of what is it that you still need to tend to? Because remembering that the harvest isn't actually quite here yet, there's still plenty of time to tend to whatever you're trying to grow in your life. So what in your life still needs some tending? and what in your life is showing signs of success. So it's important for us to celebrate the successes too. It's really dark world right now. It's really hard to get swallowed and pulled down by all the bad stuff happening. So I think this is a good time of the year to like pause and just be like, you know what? There's some bad stuff going down, but here's a couple of things that are going well in my life, or here's a couple of things that are starting to show success, even if it's not all the success I want it to be yet. Here's a few things that are showing success, and so really, bringing that to the forefront of your mind during Litha season can be really good. It can and really fill you with more vitality. Another theme of Litha in Litha season is the transition point. Every single Sabbat is a transition point because we transition from one seasonal energy into the next one. But at Litha summer solstice and Yule winter solstice, we do have the two main transition points of the year, right? Moving from growing into dying, moving from waxing into waning. And so for us, of course, this is the transition into the darker half of the year. So other things that you can consider here is, what it in your life feels like it's at its peak already, and what has energy that needs to shift. What am I clinging to because I want that light to last forever? So that's also something to think about. So in a lot of ways, we often think of shadow work as being something that's best done, in those darker half of the wheel, closer to Samhain and Yule. But this is also a very good time for you to be doing your shadow work around, what is out in the light. Why is it out in the light? Is there something that's out in the light that I continue to cling to even if it served its purpose? Is there anything it's time for me to let go of? So those can also be good questions that you can work through your shadow work at this time. Litha reminds us that even at that brightest moment, at that peak moment, it's still just part of the cycle, right? And those of us who are wise, we know that it's great to celebrate all of that. It's great to celebrate what's going well, but there's also wisdom in knowing that that energy is about to change, and that we will shift, and the energy will shift with us. So I'm going to start to go over some correspondences now. I know as witches how much we love our correspondences. Lisa said, I think it's she think a nice hike in nature is what makes her happy. Yeah, it absolutely makes me happy, and that is going to be one of the suggestions for a way to celebrate the Litha season, is to go out and get out in nature and just be immersed in nature. Even better if you can get to a place where you're not hearing all the cars and people. I was fortunate when I was out on the hiking trail, despite being in the middle of LA, I think I only passed like four people the whole 4 hours I was hiking. So it's just kind of nice to just be out in nature and be alone, and that definitely fills me with vitality. But let us know what, for you guys, anybody else who's watching, what is it that fills you with energy and vitality and passion and joy? And when's the last time you did it? And if it's been a while, it might be time to kind of bring that in. Okay, so let's dive into the correspondences. So correspondences are like a language. It's not meant to be like a list to get perfectly right, or just grab all these things that correspond to whatever the time of the year is that we're working with. It's really about a language. So if you want to work with the energy of this time of the year, we speak the language of this time of the year. And so we choose things that are aligned and connected to it. And that's a good way, I think, to look at correspondences. So we're going to start with colors. And so, by the way, too, at the end, I'm going to give you like a couple of practices and spells that you can do. But these correspondence lists allow you to choose the things that make the most sense to you. You can put together your own practices and spells or build your altar using any of these correspondences. So the colors of Litha are the colors of the sun, like gold and yellow, orange and red. Those would all be really appropriate colors at Litha. But green is also considered a color at Litha, and white as well. The green connects us to the earth, and that kind of leads us into the two elements of Litha. The primary element is probably fire because it is a sun holiday, the sun at its peak of its power. But secondary, earth is also an element that is very potent at Litha because of this connection to the earth and what is blooming and what is growing and what is reaching its peak power as well. So I said I would get back to the herbs, and so we're going to talk about some herbs. So the idea, with herbs and flowers and plants is that anything is probably appropriate at Litha. It just happens to be a holiday. Herbs in general are tied to Litha, but there are some that are particularly tied to Litha because of their energies. So one that's very well connected to Litha, and we see like writings on this going back long hundreds and hundreds of years, is St. John's wort. So St. John's wort is connected to Litha because of its connection to solar energy and protection and light. So you can work with St. John's wort. Mugwort is also connected to Litha. It helps us with our intuition and our dreams. It's also very good for liminal work. And so one of the things that I don't even have it in my notes to talk about, but I'm just going to mention it here, is that this is a time when the veils are relatively thin. So from Beltane to Litha, it's not quite as thin as when you're going from Samhain to Yule, but it's thin. And so this is where all these stories and these encounters with fairies and the fae folk come from, is that the veils thin a little bit. And the veils are thinning, to allow more life into this plane. And as a result, it also means that we will often have more sightings or contact with fairies. We may notice things are being moved to different various places. We may notice like animals, particularly cats, but sometimes dogs and other animals as well, really noticing something in the room that you can't necessarily see. Maybe you can sense it, but you can't necessarily see. And so there's a lot of fairy activity. There's a lot of elemental activity at this time as well, and there's a lot of like nature spirit activity. And so mugwort is an excellent herb to use to sort of like help to thin the veils even more, and can help you if you want to do any work with the fairies, if you want to, tap more into your intuition and your dreams. Think of the Shakespeare play Midsummer Night's Dream. I mean, he had access to all the lore too. I mean, that's where he literally gets his idea from the play. For the play, is from these very ideas that, the veil's thin. There's more of this activity. So mugwort is a good one if you want to tap into your intuition. You want to thin the veils a little bit for yourself. Calendula is another great herb for summer solstice and Litha season. It connects us to kind of solar energy, to joy. It's also very good for healing and vitality. Yarrow is a good herb for courage, protection, and energetic boundaries. It is also very much connected to Litha season. Sunflowers makes a lot of sense because of their connection to sun, joy, solar power, and confidence. And then also, like I mentioned, any herb really could be connected to summer solstice, but other ones that are kind of noted here are rosemary, lavender, chamomile, and rose. Okay, so then that brings us into crystals. So crystals, when it comes to the crystals, stones that are very much connected to Litha and the summer solstice are stones that are the color of the sun. So a lot of yellow stones and orange stones. So they may not be on my list. And by the way, too, as always, my lists are not exhaustive. So just because I didn't say it here doesn't mean it doesn't have a connection. It's just for the purpose of the time, I only have a few things on each list. But any stone that would be yellow or orange would be totally connected to this time of the year. Some that are notable are citrine, sunstone, carnelian, tiger's eye, amber, pyrite, which is one that I absolutely love for Litha, And garnet is also connected. It's got that deep red color. Garnet's also a really good stone that connects you to your root chakra as well. So those are some stones, though of course others could also be used. Food and drinks. So if you want to kind of celebrate through food and drinks, or you're trying to create like a cakes and ale kind of for your ritual, seasonal berries of any kind. Go to the grocery store, look at what's on sale and what's seasonal and what's local, and then those would be very much aligned with this energy. Citrus is thought to carry the energy of the sun, so any citrus fruits. Honey, very connected to this time, and mead as well. And if you've never had mead, and you drink alcohol, and I highly recommend it for Litha ritual. It's one of my favorite things. Mead is a honey wine. You can get it at the Renaissance fairs often, and just a very good drink for Litha. Grilled foods of any kind, seasonal vegetables, corn, summer vegetables, all connected, lemonade and sun tea. So if you want to do like a cakes and ale, but you want something non-alcoholic, sun tea would be excellent, or lemonade. Or Beth will often she will get like a lemonade or something like that, and then she'll sometimes infuse it with herbs that are connected to the season, or berries or something like that. Symbols. So let's say you could use these symbols in any way. You can use them to draw sigils. You could use them to carve into your candles, place them on your altar, draw them places. So symbols connected to the Litha season are the sun. So any like rendition of the sun, flames and bonfires, connecting to the fire element, oak leaves connecting us to the oak king who rules this time of year, sunflowers and bees, very connected, honey, wheels of any kind of shows us that the wheel of the year, in particular the wheel that has like the solar cross in the middle. So the solar cross on its own, it's just the even armed cross. If you put that inside of a wheel, then it represents not only, it basically doubly represents the sun, but also represents the wheel of the year. Crowns and wreaths are always a great symbol too. Something fun to do at Litha is to make wreaths or crowns out of flowers, and then wear those at the ritual. And then the final thing I have on, before we get into kind of the how to celebrate, is a list of deities. So if you work with deities in your practice, of course you can call any deity, any of your patron deities, you can always call them for any ritual. If you are looking for deities that are particularly connected to Litha and the summer solstice, the sun god, and any solar deities, most pantheons, the sun is a male deity. But there are some traditions, like for example, in Japan, Amaterasu is a solar goddess. So there are some traditions that also have solar goddesses. In particular, deities that would be connected here, like I said, Amaterasu, Bast, the cat goddess, Apollo, Helios, Ra, Sol, all solar gods. The green man connects us to the earth, right? The oak king, the holly king can also be worked with at this time. And then two that our coven has worked with over the past like several sabbats, or several years, I should say, at Litha, is Aphrodite. We work with her every other year, and we work with her and her connection to animals, because again, flora and fauna are sort of at a peak energy right now, and so we use that connection with Aphrodite to help us connect to our spirit animals, and animal guides and things like that. Freya is another goddess that we work with, and in fact, she's the one we're working with this year. Freya is a goddess that from the Norse pantheon, for those who don't know, and we work with her in her ability to, and we work with her brother Frey as well, and the ability to help us find our personal power. This year, we're using that connection to help us strengthen the power of our intuition. But 2 years ago, we used it to help us kind of determine what sort of energy we needed right now. Because of this transition space, there's like, do you need more solar energy or do you need more lunar energy right now? So that's another kind of, I just like sharing like what we have done in the past, because it can also give you ideas for maybe what you want to do. So those are deities. All right, so I'm going to go back to the chat. It looks like I don't know, maybe there are no comments or I'm just not seeing them. But let us know, how are you celebrating summer solstice? The more engagement there is, by the way, when it's live, the better it helps us out. It gets this out to more people because the algorithm's like, oh, this is a video that people care about, as opposed to like one that people don't. So, all right, let me go and let's talk about a few ways that witches celebrate the solstice. Here's a few practices that you can try, and then we'll get into, I've got a couple spells for you at the end as well. So the first practice we're going to talk about is one that we've already kind of talked about. It's about watching the sunrise and the sun, or the sunset, but usually the sunrise when it comes to Litha. So I think that it's a very magical time of year. There are going to be live broadcasts of the summer solstice at many places throughout the world, but in particular Stonehenge. And so you can watch a live feed of Stonehenge on summer solstice. So like I said, summer solstice, the exact peak time is at, I can't remember the time, but it is on Sunday. And you can watch that broadcast feed, regardless of whatever the peak time is. That feed will like start earlier than sunrise, I believe, and then you'll see the sun come up. So you can always tune in to any of those broadcasts. If I can find a link to it, I will put it below this video afterwards for anybody who wants to tune into that. I think it's generally free to do. You can also just watch the sunrise from your own house, or go somewhere, out in nature and just watch as the first sun begins on the longest day of the year. You can also watch the sunset as well at the very end, because when the sun sets, that essentially on summer solstice, that essentially is the beginning of the waning half of the year. While you are out there, I mean, you can just simply watch it. You can, just kind of sit outside, kind of imagine infusing yourself with the energy. But you can also say a short prayer or a blessing. You can say a wish that you have, here at the peak of the sun's energy. You can offer gratitude for what's grown in your life. So thinking about some of those prompts from earlier in the episode, what has been growing in your life, what's at its peak power, what's coming into full bloom. You can say gratitude for any of those things. So another thing that you can do is light a candle or light a fire. So like I said earlier, you can't really have enough candles as long as you're doing it safely. You can use the candles and candle magic for anything. So like if there's something that you want to draw into your life right now, or something you want to boost and strengthen, that you want to just take advantage of this peak power of the energy of the sun, you can get a candle. You could go back in any of those correspondences. We listed a bunch of different herbs. You could get an oil. You can roll the candle in the oil. Or I like to kind of rub the oil into the candle, and then you could spread out some of the loose herbs on a piece of paper and roll your candle in the piece of paper and dress your candle that way. You could carve symbols of the sun on the solar wheel into the candle if you would like. You could do sigils and draw those into it. But so you can really go a lot of directions you can go with your candle magic. But you can also burn something in your cauldron to create a fire that way, or go and build a bonfire or have a fire outside. You could direct that energy to anything. You can direct it into a spell for courage or confidence, or something that you need to build in you, a protection spell as we move into the waning half of the year, a spell for vitality, a home blessing. The possibilities are really endless here. Now you can also make a Litha altar using any of those correspondences I talked about earlier. Your altar too, you can create an altar that is always in your house or outside. There's many different kinds of altars. I think we're going to be doing an episode on sacred space, which will include a whole like segment on building altars. But just briefly, I have like altars in my house like this is like a permanent altar that kind of always stays there. It may change a little bit, but most of the time it's the same. But you can also build an altar that you will build for Litha season in particular, and then take down or change it out as the wheel turns. You could change it out and swap out all of your Litha items for items that are more connected to the next Sabbat, which is Lunaza. So if you choose to make a Litha altar, I think yellow and gold colors always great. You could use those for altar cloths, candles, seasonal flowers, like we talked about, sunflowers, marigolds, things like that. Roses, you can place citrus or honey on it as offerings, some crystals that are connected to solar energy, oak leaves, a bowl of water that you charged in sunlight. So you could make sun water. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Any intentions that you have can be placed on your altar. So your possibilities are really quite endless with this. Now, how about creating sun water? So when we create sun water, very similar to moon water, but you want to leave the water out in the sun. So whereas with the moon water, we typically put it out underneath the full moon or the moon phase that we're interested in capturing that essence in the water. Here, you would want to leave that water out. In particular, if you could, I would leave it out on Sunday, out in the sun. Allow the sunlight to infuse in the water. You can even place some crystals like carnelian or citrine in it that also will infuse into the water and will add to that solar energy. And then before the sun goes down, you want to bring the water in, put it into a jar, seal it, and I would make sure that I labeled it with the date and what it is, so you know what it is. And then you have that sun water to do anything you want with it. You can add it to spells later. You can drink it. You can add it in food or when you're making infusions or teas. You could add it to I mentioned spells already, but it's just really great to have that water, and then you have that for the rest of the year whenever you want to use it. Okay, so let's see here. Another activity and practice for the summer solstice is gathering herbs and working with them. So if you are able, like let's say you grow herbs or plants on your land, and you would like to harvest some of them, now would be a good time to take pieces of it. I always like, whenever I take from the land, I always like to leave something behind, like a coin or even just a blessing, right? Or maybe an act of something good that I'm going to do for the earth later, like picking up trash or various things like that. So you can gather herbs. Traditionally, witches gathered herbs at the height of the sun's power to ensure they were infused with that power. But you can also, make sachets using herbs at this time, charm bags. You can add herbs to your bath. You can make tea. Make an offering using herbs, using herbs in any kind of spell work. So it would be a good time, if you work with herbs, or even if you don't, to kind of bring them into your spell work and your practices at this time. And you can also make offerings at this time as well. Offerings to the sun, offerings to the solar energy, to the fire element, to deities that you're working with, land spirits, fairies, elementals, anything. Your offerings, if you missed the episode last week, we did a whole episode on how to do offerings. So you can go ahead and check that out. I'll drop that link in the comments afterwards. But typical offerings, just traditional general offerings, are water and flowers, honey, bread, fruit, herbs, singing, offering a prayer, offering a creative, something creative that you've made. Tending to a garden or a plant would be a great offering to the earth and the sun right now, picking up trash outdoors. And so you can do something as simple as that. Let's say you don't have a lot of time, but maybe you want to leave an offering of like a bowl of honey or some fruit or something at the base of a tree, just to thank the land spirits and the tree itself. So a great time to leave offerings as well. Okay, so I'm going to go into kind of our final step, or final segment of the episode. And I just wanted to give you a couple of simple spells. Again, remember, you can take all these correspondences, you can make your own practices and DIY spells. Here's a nice little spell for protection at Litha. So I like to do charm bags, like I always call them sachets, and so you just get like a piece of cloth, and you get the herbs that you want to work with, and you get a ribbon, and that's literally all that you need. And so this is a really nice, like to make a little protection sachet. You can use herbs that are connected to the season. So like, for example, like rosemary and yarrow, maybe some St. John's wort if you can find it, or calendula. A pinch of salt is always connected to protection, so you could put that in there as well. And so basically, you get your herbs, you place them onto the piece of cloth. If you would like to add any crystals like tiger's eye, or maybe a sigil, maybe you make a protection sigil, you could draw that and you could place that into on top of the herbs. And then what you do is you're just going to take the cloth and you just kind of cinch it all up and then tie it with the ribbon, and now you have your protection sachet, and you can carry it with you. You can tack it above like a door. I've done that a lot. You could put it in your glove box in your car. If the sachet is for like somebody else, you could give it to that person. Like put it in a kid's backpack or something like that. But really nice little kind of spell that you can do. And then if you want to like step it up and you want to add to it, you could also get a candle, gold or yellow candle or orange candle. You can light that, and then what I would do is I would kind of close my eyes and I would think about like whatever it is that you're trying to protect. Just imagine a ring of golden light just encircling that thing. So if it's your car, you're trying to protect safe travels, just imagine a ring of golden light encircling your car. Or if it's like another person you're trying to protect, or your home, or you, or a pet, just imagine that golden light encircling them. And then you can just say some kind of a little incantation. Here's an example. By sun and flame, by herb and light, this charm protects by day and night. And you could just say that a couple of times, or come up with one of your own. By sun and flame, by herb and light, this charm protects by day and night. And then do what you're going to do with the charm. So another thing you can do is a spell for confidence. So I think this is a great time if you want to bolster your self-confidence. Here's a little solar confidence candle spell. So here you're going to want a yellow or an orange candle, or if there's another color that you feel is associated with confidence, you could do that. If you can't find yellow or orange, you can always substitute with white. But if you're able to find yellow and orange, at least you're also bringing in that energy of the summer solstice. You can also get a stone if you would like to work with in this spell, like sunstone would be a good one, or citrine or carnelian, tiger's eye, any of the ones that I mentioned earlier that were connected to the solstice. And then if you'd like, you can grab some cinnamon as well. I didn't mention that as an herb connected to solstice, but it is because of its connection to the heat and light. And so what you're going to do is you want to really think about, what is it that you want more confidence and courage around? And so what I would do is I would write on a piece of paper one action that you would like to take. So it could be something that you're afraid to do. So I have a student who just graduated from college, and I'm trying to help her find a job right now. She's in Florida, and she's just kind of like, she's just scared about putting in applications and following up with people, and so maybe for her I would have her write, I follow up on all of my job leads with courage and confidence, or with ease, or something like that. So what is the action you'd like to take? Kind of, if you're having trouble thinking of it, envision yourself in the future, you filled with vitality and courage and confidence, and what are you able to do at that time, and then write that action down. What you can then do is place the paper underneath the candle. If you would like, you can sprinkle the cinnamon around. You can place any of the stones around it as well and kind of create this little like spell space on your altar. And then I would just say something, in regards to like your intention. So you can say, as the sun stands high, so may my spirit rise. I call back my courage and my will and let my next step be clear. So I'll just say that one more time. So as the sun stands high, so may my spirit rise. I call back my courage and my will and let my next step be clear. And then if you want, you can also sit for a few moments, light the candle, sit for a few moments in front of the candle and just listen, try to open up all of your senses and just listen for any inspiration that comes through, keeping in mind it could be like images, it could be sounds, it could be even just a thought in your head. Like if you think all of a sudden of your, I don't know why this came to me, my grandpa's farm or something, for example, it could be leading you to something important in that like image that pops into your head or that memory that pops into your head. And so I would contemplate what that could mean and how it could be connected to the intention I'm doing at that time. So that's a really nice little practice, and then I'm going to close here just with a little sun water blessing. So I already kind of mentioned this, but if you would like to bless some water and charge it with the solar energy, you are going to need a bowl of water, right? Or a little container to put your water in. And you can even, like what I was talking about earlier was making a kind of general sun water, but if you'd like to infuse it with a certain intention related to the solstice, you could do that as well. So let's say in this case, you just want some blessings. You just want blessings from the sun or the solar energy. So before you kind of put your jar of water out there, you can hold it up to the sun, speak your intention. I infuse this water with the blessings of the sun. May I be filled with vitality. May I be filled with joy. May I be filled with confidence and love. And you can say whatever you want. Just speak something from your heart. And then you will allow that water to remain there, charge it with the sun's energy. And then from there, you can use it to anoint candles. You can use it to sprinkle across your threshold for protection. You can use it to even just to like when you're washing your hands, to bless your hands. Water a plant with it, with that vital energy, right? So there's a lot of different options that we can do. So I'm going to close now just with a couple of questions for you to contemplate. Some of these we talked about earlier in the episode, but really kind of thinking about if you want some journaling questions to carry you through the next 6 weeks or so. What is blooming in my life right now? That's a good one. What deserves celebration? So what is blooming in my life right now? What deserves celebration? What is taking too much of my fire? That helps us get into the shadow side of it. What's drawing your life force energy away? What is taking too much of my fire? And what am I ready to stop feeding with my energy? Kind of a similar question, but looking at it a little bit different. What am I ready to stop feeding with my energy? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it gives you some kind of food for thought of what you will do as you move forward into Litha season. Remember, it starts at summer solstice on Sunday, but that is not the only day. You got plenty of time to do any of these practices. I really encourage you to, I think the more you make the turning of the wheel a part of your life, not just this thing I do on one day, like some Christians just go to church and then that's it, But if we can bring this energy into our life as we move through the rest of Litha season, you're just going to feel more embodied with the energy. You're just going to have a better time as the wheel turns. Remember, Litha is a very powerful time of the year where the sun is at its peak energy. It's a time of celebration, vitality, abundance. But it's also that reminder that all things change, all things transition. This energy will change as well, but it will return again. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have an awesome Litha. But let us know in the chat, how do you usually celebrate the summer solstice? Is there anything in this episode that is inspiring you and something that you want to try? We would love to hear from you. So I'm also going to move into the Q&A really fast. I have a question that was sent to me that I'm going to answer now. But if there's anything you guys want answered, it doesn't have to be about Litha or summer solstice. It can be anything related to shadow work, energy work, or witchcraft. I'm happy to answer it. Put it in the chat. If you're watching back in replay, you can put your questions in too. I'm happy to answer those. I always go back after and answer anything I didn't do during the feed. So I'm just going to go back. I see that there's some comments I can now see here. So Lisa said she wants to work with Freya. Well, good news for you. We're working with her at our Litha ritual on Saturday. And Lisa's part of our Shadow Seekers membership, so we'll be working with her. So Bernadette said, we will be doing a camping trip up in the mountains of Wyoming. She said bonfire, cakes, and ale, and a ritual. She said no electricity, no internet, and it will be blissful. Yeah, what a great way to celebrate the summer solstice, to just be out in the middle of nature and totally disconnected from like internet and electricity. That's really awesome. You guys are going to have an awesome time. Lisa said, I'm taking my trifold lawn chair out to the farm to watch the sunrise. Awesome, awesome. And then she also said, I love to burn candles. I almost always have one burning at home. I do too. I literally have one burning, like not 24/7, but I light candles every night with specific intentions. Andrea said she's going to be setting up her Litha altar and also enjoy doing summer pots for the season, or simmer pots for the season, for the summer season, right? Lisa said she uses her sun water to water her plants. Oh, okay. So Andrea said, what about making a charm bag and charging it in the sun on Litha? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Similar to like, what I was mentioning with the herbal sachet. Absolutely would be a great way to do it. A charm bag is like a mode of magic. It's like a way that we do magic. So you can do a charm bag literally at any time, and it just is colored by the energy of that time. So in this case, colored by the energy of summer solstice. So the intentions that we would want around that charm bag would be kind of related to like summer solstice, solar energy, fire, courage, confidence, passion, things like that, protection. Yeah, very good. Good idea. Lisa said, I'm going to make a protection sachet for my husband and his new Harley. Excellent. That would be a great idea to do. And then you could just put it somewhere in the Harley. I think that's great. Samantha said, I just spent an hour watching for this meeting to start at a post where it didn't occur. I'm sorry to hear that. And then Samantha also said, I'm not encouraged to attend another live training session. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad too, like when you're waiting for something and then it doesn't show up in the feed in that right place. I hope this showed up in the right place. It could be my fault. I thought I put it in the right place, but who knows? Sometimes I'm also aware that Mercury retrograde is starting in just a couple of weeks, which means we are already in the pre-shadow period, which means that things start to go a little awry as we move into those final 2 weeks before. Andrea said, she uses her sun water to make coffee along with moon water. Very good. Cool. And then she said she loves using birthday candles, especially if I don't have a lot of time to have for the candle to burn out. That's an excellent suggestion too. So if you want to burn a candle down and you don't have a lot of time, birthday candles will burn down very quickly. When you put them on your cake, you just put them on the cake, you blow them out. You don't realize, like, if you actually let them go, how quickly they would burn out. Same with chime candles, which are very small as well. So very good idea. Okay, I have a question here from Matan. I hope I am pronouncing it right. And the question is, should I be afraid to ask Hecate to help me? So I wanted to bring this question up here because I think that there may be other people who wonder about working with different deities, working with Hecate in general. I think the first questions that I would have for somebody who is like feeling uncertain about working with a deity is to kind of work through what are your uncertainties, what are your fears around it. If you've never worked with a deity before, then there could be real fears around that. As far as working with Hecate, she is, in my experience, a very easy deity to work with. We've worked with her many times in our coven. In fact, probably the last 5 or so years, we've worked with her at Beltane and then also at Samhain. She's a deity who is very accessible to people, which I think is why so many witches are drawn to her. She comes to people in different ways. It kind of depends on what you need in your life. Like sometimes she appears as a young version of herself. Sometimes she's the older crone version. She is a psychopomp, which means that she helps usher souls, across the veils. And so she can also help people to communicate with ancestors, to help people to kind of get through the veils, or like at least between the veils so they can get closer to the ancestral side to communicate with it. She is a goddess that can help to instill people in power. She can help people with shadow work. There's just so many facets to her. And I've yet to find anybody who's come to any of our rituals over these 5 years who ever had a problem working with her, or any bad things happen or anything like that. So I think it's because the way the question is worded about like, should I be afraid to ask her? I don't think there's anything to be afraid about, but it's always something that you can work through in your shadow work. It's just kind of, where are your fears coming from, and sort of kind of kind of like pull those apart, figure out where they're coming from, and then you'll be able to kind of step into your work with Hecate with less of that holding you back, right? Um, Again, I'm not entirely sure. I could be interpreting the question wrong. Another side of it I can see is if sometimes people are afraid to ask deities for help because they think that like, oh, this is this all powerful being. It doesn't want anything, or she or he or it doesn't want anything to do with me. They are, so far away from me. I have found in my experience that when a person comes with an open heart to working with deities, like I've literally never had a deity turn me away or felt like I was being turned away when you come with a pure heart. And when you engage in that relationship with the deities, it becomes um, a relationship of reciprocity. It's something we talked about in the episode last week about, offerings, right? There's so many bounties and beautiful things that we gain from working with deity, and then we give these offerings back in return, whether it's water or wine or roses, or it's an act or something that we have done in their honor or in their service. And so I feel that I don't see any reason why you should be afraid to work with her. I think that when you feel that tapping on your shoulder, you hear that, should I work with her? Like when you start to ask those questions, that's usually the deity back there tapping you on the shoulder. Now, that being said, I've had many who've tapped me on the shoulder for years. It's just not the right time to work with them yet. And they can kind of stay in our periphery. And then there's others that come front and center, and we work with them because that's like what we're working on at that time. But Hecate is a great goddess to work through your fears, to work through your shadow work, to work through like your liberation, for all this crap going on in the world, and like all the pain and the suffering. I think that's also why so many people are attracted to her in the witchcraft communities, because she's a goddess who helps us get through those like that darkness. So I hope that question helps. I hope it answered it correctly. And if it didn't, just let me know, and I will try to answer it more specifically to what you need. So, Andrea also in the chat, she said that there are many people in Shadow Seekers and in Body Mind Witchcraft, which is the free group. She said that work with Akate, and she's right. There's many, many people in the Body Mind Witchcraft group and in Shadow Seekers who work with her. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to put them in the group. Ask people what their experience of working with her is. Any of your fears that you have, put them in the group, and you will get some feedback from others as well. I know Andrea personally works with Hakate. She said she's great to work with, even if you have never worked with a deity before, and that's a good point too. Even if you've never worked with one before, she's a great one. She's very accessible. So I hope that you enjoyed tonight's episode. So we're going to close up for tonight, but welcome to Summer Solstice season. I hope it's great for all of you. Leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the episode. That will help us get this out to more people. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Body Mind Witchcraft. We're working to get monetized this year, and that just means we need more views on our videos. I'm also starting a brand new series of videos. I've already filmed the first 2 of them. They're bite-sized. They're like just a couple minutes long, and I'm going to be answering these questions that people send me, or the most common questions people ask me, be answering those in short videos, and then those are going to start to appear on the Body Mind Witchcraft channel. But subscribe to the channel, and that way you will never miss anything. I'm also going to drop a link in the chat if you haven't signed up for our mailing list. This gives you a link where you can do that, and that way you will get an email with the recording, the replay of all of these episodes, and that way you'll never miss one. And I also share different things in the emails, like books I recommend, which reminds me before I go that I forgot to show you these 2 books. So let me just do that before we close up here. So this is coming back to this book. This is Midsummer. Magical Celebrations, Midsummer and the Summer Solstice by Anna Franklin. So this is part of the Llewellyn Sabbat series, and this happens to be the one for Litha. It's a great book. It has lore in it. It has tarot spreads. It has rune spreads. It has recipes, correspondences, spells, rituals for solitaries as well as for groups. So great book. I definitely recommend checking it out. And then another book, if you're interested in kind of working with the sun, this book, Drawing Down the Sun. This is Rekindle the Magic of the Solar Goddesses. This is by Stephanie Woodfield. This is another great book to kind of take you through Litha season if you're especially interested in doing some solar magic. All right, well, I hope that you have a great time as you move into summer solstice. We'll see you next week. Next week, I believe, I have an episode coming up on the law of magnetism and creating your desired life. And I will see you then. Until next time, blessed be.